if you had to break down the illusion of how journalists in the city, in New York, in LA, viewed all things Kamala elite campaign vibe check, how would you describe that?
I think it's important here to kind of contextualize how journalism got to the spot that it's in today. Because if you go back to the late 1800s to early 1900s, journalism in America was an extension of political parties. Newspapers were created by political parties as messaging tools. And it wasn't until the early to mid 1900s that the idea of objectivity came into play. It's also around that time that journalism moved away from a working class trade of people who maybe didn't have the labor skills to work in manual labor, and they weren't really smart enough to go to college because that was a really rare thing in those days. A lot of those people became journalists. And then when the idea of objectivity came along, there was this idea that in order to be objective, you had to be trained in how to do that. So you get the journalism schools, you get journalism degrees, and over time, what that led to was the most elite people in American society becoming journalists. So they became increasingly divorced from the American public. Now you see that people who work at the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal have educational levels on par with United States senators and Supreme Court justices, which is like not to say that it's necessarily a bad thing to be educated, but when those people live primarily in coastal cities, they're usually far less religious than the average American, make a lot more money. They tend to come from parents who are white collar. They have fewer children. You can see that there's this built-in disconnect between the average reality that Americans are living on a day-to-day basis versus the reality of a journalist working at one of these large corporate papers.